My very short introduction is that I heard CL speak in Hong Kong and was totally blown away. Later, I had the extreme good fortune to be able to go to Taiwan and in fact be in the downtown area where Occupy Congress was happening and witness that firsthand. When I heard that CL was doing a bit of a world tour and even coming as close as Washington, D.C., but not coming to New York, I said, oh no, we have to do something about it. And so with no next help, we're able to have CL with us tonight. So I can't say enough good things about this person, so I'm just going to let him go forward.
Right. Well, this is not in London. I haven't changed the first page of cover of the slides, but hello everyone, thanks for coming. So in 2012, the Taiwanese government aired a commercial about so-called economy power-up plan. And essentially the commercial is saying that economy is very complicated, right? You, the citizen, or we, don't need to know the details. The government will take care of it. So we should just leave everything to them, right? I was really unhappy with this, and in fact I was quite angry about that. And they spent this crazy money on this 40-second commercial and then got like all over internet and people reported like scam on YouTube or whatever. So the government account actually got banned from YouTube for a couple of days. And so anyway, so I haven't introduced myself. I'm CL, that's my Twitter. And so I've been doing open source software stuff for about 15 years or so. Yeah, I'm a good friend with Ingi. So yeah. And so I was really angry about this commercial, and I decided, okay, I need to do something. I'm so angry. So, and that time I actually had an accident from paragliding. So I was lying flat for a couple of weeks, and then afterwards, I had a big surgery, and then there's like, I cannot do any outdoor stuff, right? So I can have lots of time caring about what's happening in the government, right? So I just wanted to see, okay, right, you're making this stupid commercial. How much money did you spend on this? And how is the government spending our money, tax money? So I was just trying to visualize the government spending. And then, of course, the government released budgets in nice PDF files, which no one can process. And so with some coding, we kind of extract them and then just turn that into nicer forms of bubbles. I'm sure you've probably all seen this on New York Times, where they visualize the US budgets. We do the similar things. So each bubble is an entry of particular budget. And then the color is like if it's increased or decreased from last year. And you can group it by the ministries that's responsible for that or the type of business. And then hover on it, you can see the history of particular entry. Right, so that was kind of interesting project. We did it within like 2 days with a couple of friends working together. And we decided, okay, that's interesting because we can actually visualize government data and let people know what's going on. And so that became the first project of the GovZero community. Right, so, oh, by the way, if you have any questions, just interrupt, or if I'm talking like incomprehensive stuff, just like wave, or if I'm talking boring stuff, just like, go faster, faster. Sorry?
Did you learn anything shocking?
Shocking? Yes, actually. Well, lots of pension fund and well, the interesting bit is that people, when you started doing something, the people start criticizing, why didn't you do this? And doing this is useless, right? That's common. And when we start doing this, people will say, okay, this is not really useful because like the top left-hand side is the defense budget. And they're very large chunks without any details, right? So people say, you should look into details. This is not useful. Whereas like on the, somewhere down there, on the right button, you have the Ministry of Economy, which has very detailed budgets. So even with this chart, you can see which minister are more open with their budget data. So that's a step for knowing what's there and what's not there, right? So that's where we can dig more to see why is the Defense Department not releasing data and things like that. So anyway, we kind of like wanted to not just have this budget visualization as a one-off thing. So we kind of started to think, okay, how can we build a community doing this kind of civic hacking stuff? So the idea is that well, government websites, of course, called gov.tw in Taiwan, well, or top-level domain gov here, right? And what if you can just change one letter and then suddenly the website becomes a lot better with open API, open data, and things like that. Wouldn't it be awesome? And if we do it in open source, the government or its vendor can just take it back. And then suddenly, when people are used to gov0, they can just change it back to gov.tw again, right? Well, you have to spend some money to get a top-level gov0 for the US, I guess. But yeah, it's not a big deal in Taiwan. Anyway, but the 0 bit there is also meaning, like for myself, I consider myself as a digital native. I never bought newspapers, right? I got all my information from like online. And so we're thinking about how like the digital native generation might be able to rethink how the government should work from 0. So that's also what the 0 means. So we're kind of like just a community. There's no formal organization trying to build this community around the open source idea and have people collaborate and work together. So in summary, we're trying to push toward open government, like kind of know more transparency, participation, all the things you know, with open data or without. I mean, when there's open data, it's good, but when it's not, we scrap the data, turn it into proper format, and talk to the data owner, say, okay, if you do this, suddenly you have application that we build, right? You don't have to build that by yourself. And we run this community as a huge open source project. Everyone's welcome to join, and then we encourage people to share ideas early, and then things like that. So there's a detailed write-up about the first year of gov0 on this URL if you're interested. It's quite a long article. It's like a paper style. It's good bedtime reading. So it's gov0.asia/tw. So we've been around for about a year and a half now. And there's like plenty of projects, like I think more than 30 projects. And I'm just quickly go through some of them. And if you're interested in particular one of them, just like raise your hands or like ask questions or things like that. So the Congress in Taiwan, since we're going to cover the Congress occupation later, right? So it's the Congress in Taiwan is called Legislative Yuan. Yuan is kind of a weird government structure, like a top government bureaucracy in Taiwan. So the URL for the Congress is called ly.gov.tw. So like I said, if we just change that to ly.gov0.tw, we'll provide proper API and proper interface for tracking bills and even more. So this is like the original Congress vote records. Of course, text is already good, right? But it's still hard to read who voted what. So we turn that into a nice chart, very simple, yay or nay or abstain, and then you can like kind of expand it with the party. So yeah, you can see who actually vote in line with the party or not, or things like that. And we also do some visualization for this is the life of bills, right? You have bill being proposed, either rejected or go through first reading, and went to committee, and then second reading, third reading, and stuff like that. So we render that in this is called Sankey chart, which is a nice way to visualize flows and the quantities of like each flow and between each node. Okay, so you can see there are lots of, the top right is the unhandled ones. So you can see unhandled bills are a lot, and then they're coming from most of them after first reading is not processed at all, right? So it's just a way to get an overview and to get a top-down view for what's happening in the Congress.
What's hairy committees?
Well, because this needs some optimization because the committee, there are 8 different committees in Taiwan. I think more here, right? But the committee can have like a joint committee meeting. So it's kind of, you can have combinations of committees. So we're just trying to also improve the visualization here, maybe with just the primary committee, because the chart gets very hairy here. So it's not very readable.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So with that, this is like just a prototype, and hopefully we want to do like a temporal play that you can see like from this session of the Congress. How was the flow changed? How each bill passed, where, and you can pause in time and then locate each bill, something like that. Yeah. So that's part of the Congress. We call this website ly.gov0 called Congress Matters. So about Congress Matters and also Congress Matters, right? So this is the funny part where we turn each of the video clips, because you know Congress video is long, like whole day, and it's kind of boring for people to watch through. Luckily, we have the metadata from the parliament themselves saying, okay, here's a clip from this minute to that minute by whom. Okay, so we kind of extract those information and then visualize it in a nice way. But we do have to process the waveform ourselves to produce that, okay, from 9:30 they started talk until like 11 something, right? Because it's easier for people to just click and seek through where things are happening. With this overlay of who's speaking, that you can actually navigate it more easily. And we give every second like a permanent URL, so you can link to particular second, and also not losing the context. Because media is often like quoting just one sentence. But with that, you can seek to that second, but still look what's happening, what's being said before, or what's the question being answered. So yeah, it's kind of useful. But still, I mean, Congress video is really, really boring most of the time, right? So we decided, okay, we should make some games on that. Is it that? Okay, so it's like the normal questioning sessions, and the thing is that you can throw things if the MP, the congressman or the official is like saying something you don't like, right? So it could become really, really popular and went on TV, went crazy, and but we are not always like being negative, throwing things. You can also raise a net to protect them. And this is all connected, so it's like a shared stream. So I will see other people throwing things, and the idea is you can see there's a bar down there to see. In addition to the waveform you saw earlier, we wanted to show that where are like interesting parts where people got angry with things being said, right? So it's another way to mark interesting period of the Congress video, right? So that was interesting and well received. And of course, we got this bill progress thing, and I think here Sunlight does it very well. And I think the Congress website themselves now do quite all right progress reporting for bills, right? So yeah, but we don't have that in Taiwan, so we scrapped it from various places, like because the Congress is weird. They have an IT department, they have this recording department, they have this Library of Congress, and they all do things differently. So we kind of like get all the data like correlated then, and then cross-referencing them properly, because like the Library of Congress has the most of the manual data, like the metadata being entered manually, which is very high quality because like you can't really tag a speech machine like by machine, right? So they do have the labor to do that manually. But some of their identifiers are different than the IT department, so it's kind of hard to make them together. And then so we do some hacking and then just merge everything together into a nice API. Anyway, but most interestingly is this is a proposed bill in the Congress. It records like what's the law being changed and the original version of that and the one that's being proposed. So this is the same-sex marriage bill being proposed last year. It's being quite controversial in Taiwan, of course, same-sex marriage. So we turn that into what programmers are comfortable with, like the Diff, right? The original version and new version. So of course you can't probably read that, and we give every bill a unique URL that people can link to and discuss about it, like with actual content that's in the bill. Because what happens is the same-sex marriage bill was being bashed by traditional people, saying, okay, you're now allowing cousins to get married or things like that, but it's not really in the bill. So the bill is basically substituting men and women into like more gender-neutral terms of the existing law. And so basically, this gives people more a way to discuss based on what's actually being proposed. So there are like reasonable argument against it or reasonable argument supporting it. But if they're not based on what's actually in the bill, then it's worthless, right? So that kind of give a lot of attention from we get a lot of attention from mainstream media as well, because this is like the most clear way to discuss this bill. So the lucky thing is that in the government, in the Congress bill document, they are already in 3-column form about the original text and the new text and the description, right? I know in some countries the bill were some of them, like Germany, would say that the second paragraph and the third line should be changed to something that, something, something. So it's a semantic diff, right? So for them, they have to turn that into the original text and the new text. And I was told in Germany there was actually a company selling that service. Like, yeah. So, I will talk about a federation called Populous lately, and we're trying to work together to extract all these common tools that's being used all over the world and see if we can have something, the shared toolbox for doing these kind of things. Right. Build Diff. Right. So we started this Build Diff thing about, I think almost a year ago now. And we're trying to expand it, extend what we have already into what if we can have this form of build, this form of diff that is used for bills that is not already in the Congress yet. For example, this is a copyright reform law being proposed by the government, and that's not really in the Congress yet. So we turn that document into the format you saw earlier, like this. And then we're still trying to build a website to you can discuss what's being changed and also maybe do a fork, provide alternative version to that, and things like that. This project is called Build Lab. So it's still like young and not, it's not production, but it's a proof of concept. You can see there's a pop-up of annotation there. You can like mark things and then say, okay, you seriously, you mean this? But there's no code for like doing alternative suggestion yet. So yeah, if you're interested, let me know and we can work together. So apart from Congress, I'm mostly involved in the Congress-related project myself, but the community has grown quite a bit. So there are lots of interesting projects I'll just quickly go through. So this is something called News Helper. It's a Chrome extension, and it warns you about like news report that is not based on truth. Okay, so everyone can submit a report. So okay, this is controversial. This is the reporter is just saying something wrong, not existing, or something like that. And it actually tells you that the news you saw 10 minutes ago is being reported. So it's a way of a countermeasure to mainstream media, like brainwashing people, or at least you have a way to report it. But the quality of report can of course be discussed and improved and things like that. But at least you get a channel to tag into existing report, because before that you can't do anything when people say something untrue on the mainstream media afterwards, right? So this is an attempt to countermeasure that. And similarly, this project built in a news archive and diff tool as well. So we have a way to see if the mainstream media changed part of the content at a certain point of time. So you have the archive of full changelog of news articles. And this is another Chrome extension called Job Helper. So when you go to like a job website looking for a job, and with this extension, it pop up a message saying, okay, this company violated labor law code blah 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 2 months ago. Are you sure you want to apply? Something like that. So so it's a very interesting project. And the problem with this project, or the problem that this project had with is that the government, the government is the local government responsible for reporting and publishing those data. And of course, all of the government, there are 23 local government in Taiwan, they all do it differently. So I have to do a lot of manual work to do the conversion and things like that. But once we do that, and we have a suggested form of the data that we want from the government, right? So we take that data to the ministry that is responsible for overseeing this process and tell them you should ask local government to release data in this form. Yes.
Have you found that there's a significant number of fewer applications to malignant employers, or what have you found to be the results from something like this?
Right. The question is that do we find like significantly like fewer application if it's being reported or things like that? Because we don't get the stats or the data from the job website, because this is just an extension for like five major job websites. But if you actually apply or not, we do not record it or collect the data. So we don't really know. But it's very popular, being installed by, I think, more than 50,000 people in Taiwan. Yeah, so. So I was talking about something about if there's open data, that's great. If not, we take the data and then turn it into open format and talk to the ministry or department responsible for that. And the dictionary project is called Moedic in Taiwan. It's the most successful one. Because basically they had a really, really old internet dictionary, which is recommending you to use IE5. And so there's this huge project done by, I think, more than 20 people, getting all the data, doing it properly, semantic link to cross-referencing, and then there's a French guy studying Taiwanese in Taiwan, and then implementing like French, English, and German on top of that. So it's becoming like a huge dictionary of cross-referencing and interesting bits. So, well, of course, the original data from the Ministry of Education is unlicensed. So they're claiming fair use at the beginning of this project and releasing every code as CC0, so they don't claim anything. And that's interesting because in Taiwan, if you don't cause any loss to copyright infringement, you're not really liable for anything, right? So if they're not claiming any right, they are not infringing anything. That's tricky. But, well, the story goes on that they actually talked to the Ministry of Education and described that what they're doing, and if you release this project as some proper license like CC BY or whatever, then this data can be more efficient, can be used in more different ways and more in creative ways maybe. But like for example, like people in mainland China are already using this data illegally, unlicensed in products already, right? So given that, you might as well like do it properly, licensed, so we can do it here in Taiwan legally. And they seem to be convinced, and so I think this probably, I'm not sure if it's announced yet, but it's going to be CC BY or maybe ND, I'm not sure, but they're constantly talking about this and then very positive about what's being suggested. So that's a very good example for like getting data, making application, and go back talking to them to release data properly. And so you can see from we have the government, the Congress project, we have the budget, the project. So at the beginning, a lot of the project in Gov0 is about like seeing what government's doing, trying to make transparency and things like that. But then you have the dictionary project, and there was people doing the straight pad adoption project, and things just come out from love as well, like caring people and caring stuff. So there are lots of interesting projects going on. So we're around for just about 18 months, and every 2 months we have a huge major hackathon about 130 people. And just February this year, we were part of the Code Across event as well. I guess there's hackathon here as well. Yeah. And we have now more than 1,000 contributors. And these are people who submitted patches or reported issues or talk about something and then got turned into issues and things like that. And like people speak around, we have like more than 10 people who are speaking about how we work and then or a particular project in Gov0. So I was told by Tom Steinberg from the UK that Taiwan and Israel are actually the two most active civic hacking community in the world. He's been talking to everyone, I guess. Right. Well, I guess the number is wrong. This must be 30% designers here. Okay. So we're like more than 1,000 contributors. And shockingly, we have about 250 people on IRC all the time. You see, IRC these days, right? Yeah, we kind of like enforce everyone. Not kind of enforce, like things are happening there, so you attract people there, right? And we have a good distribution of different flavors of people, like 40% developers and about 30% designers and another 30% being activists or people from the government. So Tom, my society guy, Tom Steinberg, was asking me, how do you like grow this community so large with like more than 1,000 people within a year and a half? So here are some recipes. Well, first is open source. I'm sure most of you already know what it's about, but what I'm saying is that you make the open source community angry about the issues they care. Like in Taiwan, there's already a huge existing open source community. The largest annual conference on open source is about 1,800 people, so every year. And so the way is that we make those people care about what's not right? Because they are the people who knows how to collaborate without central collaboration, without central coordination, right? So they can start building things from nothing immediately if you just get them angry, right? And so apart from that, we actually, because we had quite a few large hackathons, and then it's kind of hard to organize all the ideas or the things, so we actually built some infrastructure supporting this kind of ad hoc events and in the community in general. So this is a tool I built called Hackfolder, which allows you to collect different types of collaborative documents, such as Hackpad or Google Doc or Google Spreadsheet together into a well-organized way, so you can get newcomers a really nice top-down view of what's happening and well, what's not happening. So this later was actually used in the Congress occupation quite a lot. I will show you a bit later, right? And of course, you get them food, very important, food. Anyway. So, what? So, right. So I was talking about making open source people angry and then care about the issues that you feel that's not right? But step 2 is still open source, but slightly differently. It's like we know the open source people know how to collaborate, but the activist community or like people not in the open source community, most of them are not very comfortable sharing premature ideas, right? Like designer or writer or journalist, or I mean, they don't share a rough idea and then come help me. No, they don't do that. So we kind of advocate that kind of way and tell them, okay, if you share something prematurely, that's fine, and then people will come help you if they're interested. And you're not gonna finish it by yourself on this project at all, right? So yeah. So when people say that, okay, why don't you do something, often we just encourage them not just to speak about that, but write it down. Because if you have something tangible, then you can discuss and improve, right? But not just write it down. Use a mock-up tool, create some imaginary website, because I mean, everyone's already know how to use a website, and then you can imagine if this website looks like that. When you click here, you will show something like that. So this was done by Ipa, and she's not a programmer. She drew an imaginary Congress website. And later, maybe a month later, someone picked it up and turned it into actual HTML mockup into like semi-website, but with fake data maybe. And then maybe a month later, people put in real data and then turn it into like what we saw is the Congress Matter website. So this is what we call the delimited dreaming. So you dream and then other people carry on, right? Similarly, with the branding evolution, on the left-hand side, you see a really ugly logo, right? That's the first version of it. And then we just put it like without thinking too much. And then designer came in and say, oh, this is too ugly. I have to make it better. So we have 3 iterations of logo, and the right-hand side is the current one's very recognizable branding now. And so here's the suggestion for growing your community, like create a really ugly logo for people to come to help. No, but seriously, it's something that's being often said is that you should create some typos or some errors in your document at least, right? So people have something low-hanging they can fix, they can contribute. And once they contribute, they're kind of in this community now and want to see it succeed and things like that. Right, and so I was saying that we try to push the open source collaboration model beyond the developers. So there are now artists or designers that they kind of collaborate on the art bits in the community. Like someone would draw a wireframe for this, and then someone else finished the coloring and things like that. So they start getting a little bit more collaboration, which never happened before. I mean, and of course we tell them the importance of licenses, right? So you, I mean, without proper license, people cannot really collaborate. So this was image being created for the basically for the similar reason that caused the Congress occupation in Taiwan, about the trade pact between Taiwan and China. So this is a drawing for that, and it's released under what the fuck PL. So with all this open source technique, making open source community angry, and then like telling people not in the open source community use the way that we use in open source community to collaborate. The third thing is that we try to design how we engage the consumer of this information we created from whatever we're doing, either open data or not. For example, this is a PM 2.5, the air quality visualization we did. So you can see this is a really nice way to show that, okay, that area is, something's wrong in that area, right? Because from the government website, it's only just numbers and also maybe colors per particular point. So we do this really nice interpolation and then turn it into a nice chart, good branding, and then it was being quoted on even the news by mainstream media. So now we kind of like start to export information into the mainstream rather than consuming them, right?
Since you're the worst or best?
Since what? Which one?
Black is the worst.
Black is the worst, like Bombard, right?
Or good guy.
For a good guy, yes, that's where our friends live. Anyway, so so that project is actually put together really quickly because the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in Taiwan, do have open data with a nice JSON endpoint, shockingly well done. And we just grab the data and then use our existing rendering engine to turn that into the chart you saw. But we had this chart, the rendering engine back in the typhoon season last year because the weather agency, they have this nice, well, not quite nice chart about the rain meters. But during typhoon season, you kind of want to know in real time to see if it's flooding, it's gonna be flooding or not, right? So I turned that, because the rain sensors, they actually have updated every 10 minutes. So I turned that into a digital map for that. You can see on the right-hand side, it's actually uglier than the original one, right? But I just released the code and then put the data somewhere and then document it a little bit and say how to use the data. And then just like, I think about less than a week later, someone showed up and say, oh, I have a nicer version of that. So yeah, and so during this process, we kind of, it's just everything we are familiar with, like open source community, right? So, but for the end users, we don't just want them to consume the information. If they can contribute a little bit, it'll be better, right? So there was a project about digitizing political contributions in Taiwan, just happened last month. So for political contributions, the summary is published online, but the details about who donated to whom, what amount, what time is not. You have to go into this building and then print out paper, physical papers. All right. So there was a couple of NGO that came to the hackathon a few months ago saying, okay, what can we do now? You're doing something great and like all the Congress thing and stuff. But we NGO, what can we do? What can we help? So someone suggests then to go into that building and then print out some stuff and then scan it, put it online somewhere. And imagine like at some point people will fix that, digitize it in some way. So last month, there were people starting to use this scanned images, trying to, because it's usually just tabular data, right? So he did some kind of started with OpenCV, do some computer vision to recognize the frame for the tabular data, and then cut it into like individual pieces of the cells, right? So this is a demo for the pre-processing, turning that image into cells. Right? And once you have that, guess what? You can turn that into a captcha service, right? So, right.
That's cool.
So yeah, so the first batch being released online with a very simple captcha service with no achievement system at all, attracted 10,000 people, and then we cleared about 300,000 entries of data within 24 hours. It's really funny. And then the cool thing is that this is really just a simple website, and then you just put in whatever is in the image, right? Just yeah, and you can verify that. Okay, this is being like confirmed by 4 people. Do you want to say it's yes? Okay, so similar to that, and you have a nice counter about how many cells are not verified or left, which is updated dynamically. So you can kind of interesting interaction. So it got really popular, and then got some of the celebrities in Taiwan sharing the the project, and then say, oh, this is really comforting. I feel I'm contributing to something, fixing the government. So yeah, so this is like engaging people, getting people to be contributors. So of course, after that, digitized data can be used as we expect, like to turn it into a nicer way of viewing or visualize. And more importantly, we actually have the company registration data and company ownership hierarchy. And that kind of data, if we put them together, we can cluster to see which are the group of companies sponsoring some of the candidates, and then what are the bills they actually pass. Pretty much like open secret. Yeah. So because in Taiwan, I think there's a very low limit for per company political contribution. So you have to kind of group them into company which are related to make sense out of it. Otherwise, it would just be small amounts everywhere. So yeah. So while we're doing this project, there's some researcher in the academic field about, I think it's a statistician, so doing statistics. He came over and say, okay, we actually did this before. We can tell you how to analyze the data. And so I asked him, but how did you get the data? And they say, okay, we're doing similar things. And then we annoy the control yuan, which is responsible for the sunshine or the political contribution reports. And we annoy them so much they're willing to give us digital data if we sign an agreement, say the paper we publish will not be in Chinese. So they publish an English paper about how they analyze the political contribution and stuff like that. That's really hilarious. So anyway, so hopefully we're going to be able to use the same technique they've done and then do some interesting exploration once we have all the data ready. So. So, so the whole project is actually 5 different projects. Like the scanning bit, there are people refining the process for, I think they were saying something about you can print 4 pages on 1 page and the scan result is still usable. So there are a group of people refining the process, making it faster. And there are people doing the grid recognition. There are people doing the cell recognition and then the visualization. So there are about 5 different projects run by different people. And there's no central coordination about who should do what now. Things just happen spontaneously, right? So, well, this is like a small example of how the open source will work, right? And this is particularly interesting. And so we're quite emphasizing on this about how GovZero works, or how all the projects in GovZero works. Is pretty much like how the internet is built today. So we have a rough consensus about we want a more transparent or more participatory government. But we don't know what exactly it is. We just know kind of where we're going. But more importantly, we have running code, things for people to improve and things for people to collaborate on, right? So we try to push this idea, as I say, beyond the developers, telling other people to release your idea, release your work, release your article, or whatever, as early as possible. License it properly so people can work together. So that brings us to the parliament occupation. So this was the protest on the 30th of March this year. About 500,000 people went on street supporting the Congress occupation in Taiwan. There's also a write-up in English in this URL, 0sdc.tw. Right. Do people want to take a break or ask questions, or yes?
So when you guys, as this like amorphous, rough consensus community, decide to talk to other people, like people in government or
Yes.
the NGO that came and said,
Right. How does it work?
yeah.
Okay. Yes, excellent question. So the first thing we got is actually from, sorry? Oh, the question is that since we are kind of like a rough consensus, loose community, how do we deal with when the government or the media or like other people want to talk to us, right? So what happens first is like we got a lot of media attention from the Congress thing or the other things. And they started want to, okay, can we do an interview or something like that with you guys? And we say, okay, but we're not gonna be like doing phone interviews or like a face-to-face interview. You're gonna write the question to us. We'll publish an article you can quote with. Okay, so we collaborated on this response about the questions so this is one of the ways that we don't hate the media. It kind of becomes the media. So we kind of publish our own stuff, and in the sense that we export information to them. Okay, so they can only quote us, and we can like say, no, we didn't say that. Here's the full article we wrote. Right? So that's the first bit. And for government who want to talk to us, we do have a list, like a closed list by invitation only. That's for people who ever like go out somewhere, introduce GovZero, and we figured, okay, he knows this community, he knows how this works. We invited to this list, and this list is where we coordinate like speaker invitation, or when the government wants some idea about things, right?
Water?
Still have some, thank you.
You want me?
Okay, great. Yeah. So, but we'll try to put everything as transparent as possible. So this list closes is only for like there's an outside entity who does not know how the community works. So they got confused if they got 10 responses from different people, right? So it's kind of a way to kind of make their life easier. But any request we got, we publish it like in the form that everyone can participate. And like we have a lot of requests from the government about how we should do this, how we should do that, because they know there are like professional people here. They know these things, right? And with that, we'll say, okay, is it okay we publish your request to the public for the public to comment, and then we will try to summarize that for you. And if they're not okay, they say, okay, I'm not gonna respond to that. If it's like a secrecy thing or things that don't want to be public, then we say, okay, you talk to somebody else. We want everything as open as possible. So that's how we deal with other people in this kind of weird, loose community. Yeah. Yes, more questions.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Do people really get angry just because it's a transparency issue? I feel like you talked about getting people engaged through getting them upset.
Right.
How?
The question is, do people really get angry just because there's lack of transparency?
Yeah.
Yes, actually. With what happened recently in Taiwan, which I'll describe later, about the Congress occupation, what caused this is actually there was a trade deal between Taiwan and China that was being passed in the Congress within 30 seconds without actual deliberation. Right? People got angry, and mostly about the process, because in the protests and in the supporting, there are people who are pro this trade deal, but they don't like the process. And so with that kind of lack of transparency, they still didn't publish the the meeting records about the whole trade deal between Taiwan and China. So people actually got angry, yes. Okay, so So you probably know about what happened, the Congress being occupied by a group of students for about 3 weeks in Taiwan? Yes?
Liz and I were in Taiwan for the conference right after that, and I would talk to people in the streets, and assuming they knew, and they didn't, and I don't think it got any press in America, so you might want to just give a 1 second minute.
Right.
Unless, I mean, you can raise your hand if you've heard of it, but it just didn't make the news here.
Yeah, most people do. Some people don't. Yeah. Okay, but I'll quickly go through that. So the what made that happen was the trade deal I mentioned about between Taiwan and China being passed in the Congress. And so a group of students just stormed the Parliament building and then occupied it and then say, okay, here's the demand. You should have a supervising law about this kind of deal before you pass any trade deals. Okay, because constitutionally, China is part of Taiwan, and China thinks Taiwan is part of China. So with that kind of international relations, because the law defines it clearly, if it's international, it goes through the parliament. But it's kind of a weird position between China and China. So that kind of get the government to kind of bargain and say, okay, this time we do it this way, and this time we do it the other way. So the demand was to create a supervising law about all this kind of deal and how this will be processed, how this will gather public opinion, and before that actually went into action. So speaking about no U.S. coverage here, actually the movement, the people, we have a Kickstarter-ish thing in Taiwan called FlyingV, and they were able to raise about $200,000 over 9 hours, and then get no, I think over 24 hours. It was less than that, and so they got a New York Times. I don't know if anyone's still reading newspaper though. Kind of think this is wasted, right? You do, okay. Right. So they did get a front page cover for what's happening, and it's like pretty much like all black, right? So yeah, that's really short. And so what happened is 23rd of March, the other group, there's a student who occupied the parliament. There's another group of students, they went to occupy pretty much the State Department, okay, where the official works and stuff like that. And they got forcibly evicted, like kind of violently, just a few hours after. And then people were really angry and sad, and so there's a fundraise for that to get the message out and stuff like that. So during what happened in Taiwan, the Congress occupied movement for about 3 weeks, there were about 100 of contributors working on making sure things are transparent. Like what's happening inside the Congress is not being misleadingly reported by the mainstream media, and making sure the people inside knows what's happening outside, because there are about 200-300 people in the parliament building, and constantly about 1,000 or more people around the parliament supporting them and things like that. So we're a group of people just. So actually what happened is that the night of the occupation happened, it wasn't really announced or whatsoever, of course, this kind of action, right? So there was a small-ish protest, and then some of us from GovZero was there for helping the live streaming for the small protest. And suddenly someone says, oh, we're going in. So it wasn't really like announced beforehand or whatever. And so after that, there's a lot of people helping to set up internet connection, because when there's like 50,000 people, the 3G network just went down, right? So we got a physical line there, and then wired it over. There are 3 stages around the parliament. And actually, I think I'm gonna switch to a different slides. So you can see that the date is from March 19th to April the 10th. And April the 11th, we have a conference which Ingi and Liz spoke at. It's called OSDC. So we kind of call the occupation Zero SDC, as in a digital camp for, it's called, the movement was called the Sunflower Movement. So we're going to turn it into a digital camp about what we did to support and to make sure that the infrastructure there was working. So what happened is that the first day, we set up the broadcast network. There are people in the building using 4G to do broadcasts since the beginning. And we set up infrastructure for collecting all information on Hack Folder, which is the tool I mentioned earlier about we developed for hackathon events. So we have a top-down view of what's happening now, and then the text streaming, the video streaming, and supplies that's being required, because there are like tens of thousands of people around the area, and people are demanding for water or sleeping bag and things like that. So kind of a central point for coordination. And of course, we use HackPad, which is like Google Doc, but more live or more modern. And we actually crashed HackPad quite hard several times, because we have more than 1,000 people accessing the page for live text update. So we have the video streaming, and then there were people turning the video stream into text feed. Right? So text feed is easier for people at work or not able to watch a video to follow the event. And also with the text stream, people can. There's also a semi-live translation of that into English. So we just get the message out for just making sure the communication channel is clear. So we crashed Hackpad like several times, and they're very, very nice, and to say they're proud to support open government activists, and so they put additional servers to support us, and I think they gave us a dedicated instance for their services. So I think on gov0.hackpad we have about 3,000 registered users. So that's probably the largest Hackpad instance they have. So so they actually write to us to tell it to say, oh, can you tell us more about how you coordinate and things like that? So it's like an interesting use case for them. And of course, several days later, they got bought by Dropbox. Probably not related to this. So and there was a joke about the reason that's being called Sunflower is because we use a wiki style management. The wiki logo is a sunflower, but that's not true. So to make sure the network is working, that we start setting up physical lines and physical and Wi-Fi bridges between different stages, because there are 3 different places where there are NGO having events supporting what's happening inside and things like that. And
Are those are 3 separate buildings, right?
And this is actually not the actual layout for the theme. So it is actually close to what's real, but we're using the OSDC venue as a fable for telling the story. Okay. So ignore the actual layout. So R0 is the Parliament building.
But it's a I mean, those units were 3 distinct buildings, right?
No, R1, R2 are not buildings. They're outdoor things. With tents, maybe they go.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So I mean, this is the second day.
Sorry, I got confused. So none of this is from the actual building that they occupy? Or
That was the building we were at for OSDC, I think, right?
Yeah, that was meant to be a joke. For
yes, I understand you're like kind of obfuscating identities
yes.
and like some things
yes.
like that, but some of the infrastructure you set up was for the people inside a building, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I was trying to figure out.
Okay, so we kind of get the internet that's working all right outside, and then we try to like get a Wi-Fi bridge for the people in the Parliament building themselves, and to get streaming working, because there's more and more people gather, the 3G network is breaking down and things like that. So at the beginning, we used the WiMax, which is a 4G equivalent thing in Taiwan, and just distributed the WiMax routers and to people everywhere, and just use let me see, and use Google Doc to coordinate the supply requirement and things like that. And then as it would, I mean, I guess no one thought that that's going to be lasting for like 3 weeks, right? So I think 4th days or 5th days, the tension start getting high, and because people inside don't really know what's going on outside, and people supporting them outside don't really know what's happening inside, what's been decided, if they're gonna retreat or not, so it's just lots of miscommunication and things like that. So we help them to set up the projection for the live feed inside with a projection screen outside, so they can see what's happening inside, and vice versa. So there's a screen in the building as well, seeing what's happening outside and things like that. And also we kind of restructure the text feed infrastructure using IRC, which is like reliable, and we have lots of different clients for IRC already, so it's a good way to distribute text information, right? Yes.
When I saw this before, there was something about a bouquet of flowers being brought into the building. Was that like something smuggled in there? I didn't really understand the point of it.
I don't really know about that.
I thought Audrey was talking about some thing of flowers that was brought in, maybe with a piece of hardware inside.
Oh, I don't know. That's probably a joke. Anyway, so about a week after the occupation, we actually get the physical line to a nearby location from a lease line for a DSL, or I can't remember if it's fiber or not. And then we actually lay out a BNC cable and power over Ethernet cable around the venue, so different places can have like a shared connection to each other. And we started to use the new domain gov0.today, which is a hack folder instance just for this event, because hack folder was used for other things like hackathons and stuff. So we want to have like a easy domain for all the people to use, and that's actually what was being used for on posters around the venue. So if you want latest information, if you want to see the live stream, go to this URL. So yeah. And
can I ask, just infrastructure-wise, was the gov.today, what was the hits or what was the traffic that site was getting, and did you have like a local mirror?
Okay. So the architecture about gov0 and the traffic, right? So actually, I have it here. So this is the highest traffic that we got, and I don't know if it's really readable, but we have about 700,000 unique visitors across the period of time, of course. And the peak is actually, let me see, like that, active, like 11,000 people simultaneously, right? So architecture-wise, Hackfolder itself is a client-only website. Okay, so we have it on GitHub Pages, which is like Fastly, right? So it's like there's no load for us per se, and the backend for that is actually just a spreadsheet. We fetched it from EtherCalc, which is a service similar to Google Spreadsheet. Okay, so the information that's in the hack folder, I mean the hierarchical information, all the links are stored in EtherCalc. Okay, so to accommodate the traffic, we actually turn that into like a cached service. So every 1 minute, we pull from EtherCalc into gov0.today into static one. So everything is static on the site, right? I mean, apart from the actual content, when you load like the YouTube or whatever, it's not static. But the whole infrastructure, the layout itself is static. So that's kind of how we sustained the traffic.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Right. And well, the day of March 23rd was the violent eviction I mentioned earlier. So at the same time, there was a coordinated attack on the EtherCalc service. So trying to make the thing unavailable at the same time. So we don't know if it's a conspiracy or not, but it happened. And anyway, so everything is restored the next day, including the State Department building where they kicked out everyone, and then things seem to be back in business for them. And so I think the next day we start doing the actual route the physical lines between different venues. And we start getting people. There are lots of people doing the live streaming on their own using Ustream or YouTube, right? And we start getting requests that say, okay, should we print something like a journalist ID or something to be able to say, okay, we're doing journalist things, right? And so we create a generator for a journalist ID. And on the front, you have you upload your photo and your name. On the back of the ID, it says, okay, constitutionally, you are able to do journalist work even if you're individual, not being employee. And that's being described by the Supreme Court in Taiwan, and give the QR code for the full explanation given by the Supreme Court. And that became quite popular. I think we have more than 100 people sign up for that and maybe do different things. And then later on, there's another guy who created an aggregation service for all the citizen journalists, and then they can just publish their URL, and then the service figure out if it's if it's live or not, and then aggregates into like a mobile app and a Google Chrome extension. And there are people starting the campaign calling the legislator about they support this Congress occupation. They should do what's being demanded, the supervising law, before actual PAC and things like that. So people kind of like write down what you should be saying because people are shy, right? They don't know how to talk to a real person. So they kind of have a step-by-step, okay, dial this number and say this word and say that I'm not discussing this with you, I'm demanding this, and then hang up and things. So that's funny. That's called 123.gov0.today. And so that was that's interesting because the content is actually refined several times by like lawyers and people who are like trying to get people to do this, but in a more neutral way. So not just saying, okay, you should just do blah, but in a way that we demand this and in a very neutral tone. Yeah. And well, as things like goes on, there are people starting to think, okay, this is a great way to stress test their product, right? Such as we crashed the hackpad and things like that. So there's a company in Taiwan called Skywatch, and they create this. Their business is basically the IP cans, right? So they ask us, can we tap these cans on your network, and then so we can have like a IP can on every corner of things.
What are the
IP cameras, yeah.
Okay.
So and of course they say, okay, everyone can use the network, and they actually put it on, and then just making sure like every corner is being covered by live streams. And since then, I think there are less violent events than it was before. So I think it's really important to have all this. Well, it's not kind of surveillance, but I mean during this event, you kind of want every corner to be transparent, I guess. Anyway, okay. So, and then there was the huge parade on the 30s, 500,000 people, quite huge. And there was a professor who's actually a friend of mine, also want to stress test his product, or not product, his project. So we created a captive portal on the site, providing public Wi-Fi. Okay, so but when you get here, then you will see SSID called gov0 public, and then when you join, it's a captive portal saying, okay, if you want latest information, it's here. If you want the citizen journalist reports, it's here, and things like that. So for people who just passing by, we can just show them the information because it's really kind of hard to describe what's happening everything. So that was the architecture with bandwidth throttle and PF sense and things like that, and yeah. And then as so you know that the occupation started off because the trade deal between Taiwan and China, and this is actually a service trade deal, so allowing company doing services to service cross-border or setting up premises in Taiwan or things like that. And since this deal is so complicated, there are like 60 sectors involved. And it's very complicated, and the government did a really bad job explaining what's happening, what's going to be affected or what's not. So a group of people, there are some students projects in computer science students, they participate in a project called TISA.gov0.tw. So TISA is the shorthand for this service trade agreement. And so they create a very simple website. You have an input box, you can put in your company, and it tells you if you're affected or not. And if you are, what action should you take, or what level of involvement is this affect you? Okay, so that kind of got really popular, and even the government officials say that we should have done this. Right, it's better communication before what's happening, right? So so that was quite interesting. But actually, they started this project way earlier than the Congress occupation, because this was actually from August last year, when there are a group of lawyers who noticed this trade deal is going to be passed, and it's not on mainstream media whatsoever, and they're trying to map out the what's gonna be affected or not, and then figure they found that the government, the official document is really unclear. Like they have this sector ID, which is in like a WTO ID, and then they have a separate one for the domestic ID, and some of them match, some of them don't. And so it's a lot of labor work to just put that data into reusable format. And so they've been doing this for months already, and then this is the very simple result that they got, but it's a lot of work before that. And so it goes on and on and on. And then so as I said earlier, the actual demand from the occupation is that to pass a law for supervising this kind of trade deals, right? So there is actually a version of that being proposed by the NGOs that supports this occupation quite early on, and there's the official version from the government. They have another version of that. So we kind of try to turn the Congress bill Diff thing I showed you earlier into this kind of, you can compare different versions of the same act, the same bill that's being proposed. Right, so that project is called BO Lab, and you can see the AB like a Diff A and B. So that's still quite a prototype, but we can render static data for people to actually read the articles more easily now. And so as the occupation goes on and on, there are like disagreements within the people who are like in charge or deciding things, or not able to be deciding things. And so there were like demand for like more transparency within the movement itself, which is kind of funny. And so they kind of turned to us, the tech community, to say, okay, what can we do to do this massive collaborative decision making? Because it's really hard. Like, I mean, like for them, I think they have like 30 people sitting in the room, and then everyone talks about something and forgot about what it's been mentioned before. It's kind of really painful way for deciding anything anyway. So so we've actually been looking into this kind of collaborative decision-making tools for ages, since the German Pirate Party has the liquid feedback tools, and also there's Icelandic version of that, and I think there's an Italian version of that. But what we found most mature nowadays is actually something called Lumio. It's from the New Zealand group of New Zealand civic hackers, and then they just crowdfunded for $100,000, I think. And it's really simple and like a really nice UI for. It's essentially a discussion board with some voting tools built into it. So it's kind of, it is not very advanced, but it's getting there. And we actually talked to them about, okay, if we just add this feature for blah, like sharing whiteboard between different discussions, it would be helpful for this event. And they're really, so Lumio is open source, of course, and they're very helpful, and then just added the feature for us. And then they were being used immediately by some of the people who try to decide things within the movement. Anyway, so, right, that's a Lumio screenshot for deciding things and voting things. And then there was apart from the supervising law demand, there were people saying that, okay, we need to review the constitution because, well, China is part of Taiwan is something weird, right? And other things. And then they were talking about like drafting, like or discussing the constitution things. And then, but to do it at large with the people on premises, you need to do like the gesture things in the Occupy movement, right? So they kind of redesign it for other things. I don't know the details, but this was done and after discussion for how we will do a large convention about if we're gonna discuss the details about constitutions and things. So you have the gesture for like go faster and no, things like that. And so that was actually put in use because, you know, in the movement, there are like constantly people passing by around and then trying to learn what's happening, and then so there will be event about, okay, today we discussed about like for example particular topic in the constitution, and then so they have workshops around the Congress and like different places and different events. So it was very like large civil workshop about all the topics. And so we start to try to see, okay, that was the offline version for decision making, right? Reaching consensus from the people at large, and how we replicate that back into online, like in Lumio. So there was a work group trying to see how you put this online and offline decision making together for that to happen maybe at the same time or asynchronously. So and then this is something funny, but it's kind of hard to. Okay, so the whole point for us, I mean, for the Gov0 community, a lot of the tech people are involved in this movement, but not necessarily against the trade deal itself. Okay, just because a lot of people are not happy with the process and just want more transparency for things, even if the deal should go through or not. And so this is written by Audrey, and the slides from her. And he's saying that he did not know that people were going into the parliament when he was there for supporting and doing the streaming for the smallish protest that night. But afterwards, when there are people inside and outside, to connect them, there's only like the neutral internet, right? The neutral net where no information is biased, and then people can judge when they see it. So with all this proper communication channel, there can be fewer confrontation or misunderstanding, because people have the actual facts to discuss on. So that's what she meant to be doing, and that's why we were supporting this protest, this movement, and providing their internet support and all the tech tools and stuff like that. So yeah, well, she said, "Oh, this if you're a geek, you will see this as this image as a transparency." Right. So basically, this is saying that if we believe in transparency, then we should do it we should fight whatever is not transparency in the open way. Okay, that was about the occupation, and I have a few more slides here about. So this is a funny bit. So there are lots of people supporting the the live streaming, and they actually have a work group sharing how you do it the best way. All right. So this is a homemade shelf for doing live streaming. If you just have this shelf, you have some cable ties, you have some the industrial film wrapper, and you have cables. You can build something on the right-hand side, which is waterproof and not very tiring, like carrying a camera. So I think they were saying that they use this construction of it will be like a streaming station. And then the mainstream media people next to them is like jealous. It's heavy, so it's kind of interesting. And so they have a work group refining all this hardware stuff and the software suggestion for which tool you should be using and what configuration you should do. And that's very interesting as well, because that's also a way of like open source collaboration, but not quite open source, but with like things to be done. And here's another interesting project in Gov0 I didn't mention. It's called fact.gov0.tw. So that turns any Wikipedia page with a list of events of dates into a timeline. So if you have a Wikipedia, but sadly I think it only supports Chinese now, because English dates are crazy and it's not properly being done. So anyway, that project is turning Wikipedia into timeline, and then for people to read, consume the information more efficiently. And of course, this is the hack folder I mentioned. So you can see that on the left-hand side, we have all the entry point for example, this is the English transcription. So when people get onto gov0.today, if you're an English reader, and you will probably just want to see this, and then this is live updated on the right-hand side. And if you want to see like some events, some of them are live being tagged on the left-hand side as well. So this is the traffic I showed you earlier. It's quite something, and that's the live analytics from Google on the night of the violent eviction, and then because there were I think two people doing streaming that night, and then because there's no mainstream media at all doing that, so that was where people who actually care and then can see what's happening. So in summary, so the idea for GovZero is that we put these three things together: free software, civic media, and social activism. So with civic media and the what should I say? What's that? So with hands-on and open source, we had the free software people, right? And with open source idea and the public spirit idea, you get civic media like Wikipedia, and so we kind of try to glue this all together into kind of practical social platform, and then building software, building tools that's useful for this kind of things. So what's next? We actually have a domain called govzero.asia, and I think Ingi scored quite a few govzero something domain, like govzero.us. and things like that. So we're looking for more international collaboration, and hopefully also more domestic collaboration between GovZero and Gov. And so some of the agencies we talk to are really open-minded, and then they say, okay, we didn't know that. If we just release data and we can do less work, you can do the work for us. I say yes. And some of the agency are less so. So it would take time, I suppose. And lastly, there's a new federation of civic hacking community forming called Populous, and then we had a first conference in Chile, in Santiago last month. So this is started by my society in the UK and Ciudadano Inteligente in Chile. So they are like the Parliament Monitor NGO or civic hacking NGOs, and then they're seeing the way to, because like for example for Congress monitoring website, it's really hard to port one country's version to another, right? Because the system is so different. We have a one-house system, you have a two-house system. The way they vote is different. Some of them are being counted manually, some of them are has a roll call or something like that. So the idea for Populous is like componentizing individual bits, such as the build diff I showed you. It could be a component. And once we have all this component, if there's a country that people want to build a Parliament monitoring website, they can just put together all these components and then tailor-made their own version of that. So yeah, instead of the full package, we get like tiny bits that can kind of work together. So there are already quite a few components on that. And if you're interested, should look into it. So like the budget visualization thing I showed you earlier at the beginning actually is actually being reused in Hong Kong by independent media online. So they have a very similar layout things. I don't know if they actually reuse the code, but they did talk to us about, okay, we're gonna do this thing. If we have questions, can we ask you? Of course. So lastly, I want to say that is that what's the name of this chart? I forgot.
Curl 6 development.
No. There's a common name for that.
What is that?
Yeah, that's for the new thing, new technology. Often like excites people, and then when people got overexcited but nothing happened, then they get inspired and then say, oh, this doesn't work and things like that. So I was thinking that the open source model for activism is actually here. It's just starting because they are not like the people who share like open source community, but it's happening. And I would say that there will be more things like this where people collaborate more and then more efficiently, and then there will be like something's not working and then people got crazy, and then hopefully we get to the idea of what's the big deal? We should work this way anyway, right? Yes.
You're seeing the most important bubble between despair and FUD, and hey, what's the big deal? There's hack.
Yeah, right. What Ingi is saying is that between the FUD despair and the what's the big deal, there's a lot of hacking to be done there, and I guess that's what we'll be doing. Right. So anyway, some of you may know, 2008, Iceland got really badly struck by the financial crisis. Oh, we're in Wall Street today. Funny. So they got really bad hit in Iceland, and people were like angry, demanding a new constitution. And the prime minister at that time said, "Okay, you want a new constitution? Let's do that." In a funny way, is that okay? Let's have a lottery. Pick 1,000 people randomly from the country, and have these 1,000 people decide how they will draft the constitution. Okay, so well, I guess food. Anyway, so they decided they should have a national election, electing 25 committee members, and these are the 25 people they elected, not from the 1,000 people, but it's a general election for all the population. And they're responsible for collecting opinions online and offline, having workshop, hearing, and just online things. And they did draft a version of constitution with lots of people participating. And so, but sadly, I think the constitution was kind of killed by the parliament, because I don't know about their system. There seems to be the new draft was approved by a referendum, but it still has to go through the parliament somehow, and it kind of got killed there. But if it were passed, then it would be the first constitution being drafted on the internet. So the age is like coming to doing these kind of things, right? And people are actually doing it. But yeah, we'll see maybe someday. And lots of experiments are happening. Like in Finland, they were doing a pilot program for participatory lawmaking, and they actually find lots of people submitting useful proposals and meaningful comments, as opposed to what they would probably imagine before, like people were talking nonsense and then attacking each other. Oh, there are useful comments and the results, consensus from this kind of discussion. So in this age, we have this social-ish, crowd-ish things like Kickstarter. We don't really need a VC nowadays if you have a brilliant idea, because you ask the customers, this is something you want. And we have things like Airbnb, and so it's very decentralized nowadays. So hopefully we have more social and decentralized way of reaching actual democracy someday, with tools being experimented with, Lumio and all the liquid democracy systems. And I think in this area, there's so many to be done, and lots of hacking to be done, and lots of actual experimenting, working with activists and people in the government to be done. So yeah, we should probably just do it. So that's pretty much my talk.
That's like 3 talks in one.
Pretty much. Phew! I hope you're not tired with that.
So who's got questions?
You have lots of questions.
Very closely related to the last thing. Could you describe I call it the self-impeachment website, but it's basically recall your legislators by a website that you can go and actually get data on the legislators, and then form consensus out on the website to start to automate the process of a recall, or what we might call an impeachment in the U.S.
Right. That's something I missed actually. So along with I think that around the same time with the political contribution digitizing project, there's another project called recalling your Congress member and things like that. So what's happening is that there's quite a threshold for this kind of impeachment to pass. You have to have I think 15% of the voters to sign up for that, for that to be actually voted on. Okay, so to get that, it's really kind of hard to collect actual signatures and personal data on that. So someone built a website, and then it's like a Kickstarter thing. If it gets through this threshold, then we give you the URL to put in your details, and then you can go into a corner store, print it out, and then it's like a nicely generated PDF. You fold it, and then you can just throw it into the mailbox. So it's really like lowering the barrier for the recall process. And so there were, I think, one recall that's being initiated. So I don't know if it's going to go through, but it's definitely, because last year there was a similar call for action for recalling particular congressmen. And that's kind of doing in the traditional physical way, collecting signatures and things like that. And that didn't go through. And So hopefully with the help of technology for this kind of thing, and we get something, because once we have one record actually works, then I guess the people have like a bigger say, right? Yes.
So now that you have kind of the donations, the donors, the political donors online, do you foresee, in the US there's like a big kind of media spotlight on major donors, right? So like the Koch brothers or Sheldon Adelson or Tom Steyer for the Dems. Do you foresee kind of there being more scrutinization of major donors in Taiwan like that, or not so much?
The question is, now we have the way to cluster to see the major donors, and does this affect the donors to be more cautious, or to be more like, once they know this information is more public than before, do they take any different approach to do that, right? So I would say definitely yes, because you can work around things like in many ways, but at least if we get what's being recorded being actually published and more accessible by the public, at least they would, at least they will have to do the illegal way, right? And then they are actually illegal. So right now they can do this legal way and just get around with it because no one cares, right? So I think that's probably gonna happen, but they will put that in the actual illegal part. And there's a question?
How do you manage people's issue, like conflict or putting some false information?
How do we handle the people problem or if there's false information? So the way that this community work is very much like open source project. So people kind of reach consensus, people fight, but kind of people talk through issues, what's actually being the conflict, and then we'll find a common ground and resolve them. But in terms of false information, since we advocate the open source way, and there are lots of data being published, but we require that all the process needs to be documented and can be reproduced, so everyone can verify it. And of course, you can always put false information, but if it's easy for people to verify, to redo whatever process you generate the data, then it's like more eyes on that, more you can kind of, the community self-corrects itself. Yeah. So another interesting thing is that at the beginning of GovZero, we drafted a version of a manifesto about what we'll be doing and what we'll not be doing. And I think that's really important because we say, okay, we're focusing on the transparency and the freedom of speech and things like that. And we don't want to be associated. We don't want to be partisan and things like that. So once we have this central idea, and then there's actually no one deciding what project is a GovZero project or not. The community itself kind of discussed it. So there was like an anti-particular party project. And then people say, no, because the manifesto say we shouldn't be doing that. Can we refine it into more general ground to something more neutral or something, right? So it's very interesting because no one is dictating, saying, okay, this is a GovZero project, this is not. We have this simple requirement, okay, it has to be open source, about public, and partisan, and things like that. So the community kind of corrects itself when there are like newcomers doing out of line crazy things and crazy proposals and things like that. So I think that kind of works quite all right. And given that we have this 500,000 protests, and then a lot of people started to care about things, so we have quite an influx of people trying to do things or propose things or criticize things. And this is kind of, we call it a Sheldon crisis. It's kind of diluted the original culture of a doer culture. But I think we're surviving it because lots of people are helping to turn the input from people who are not familiar with open source model, who are not a doer, who say, you should do this, not do that. We try to turn those into more constructive, maybe just an issue in GitHub or whatever. So we have lots of people helping to nurture this community now. So yeah, yes.
My question sort of went along with this. I was curious if you could speak a little more about your projects page. It seemed like you had a projects page that listed the different projects you had. Perhaps how that is populated and how you sort of generate and work with that, as well as how that links up with the imaginary dreaming?
Mm-hmm. So the question is about our project page, project registry, or idea pool, idea registry. And I would have to say it's not very well done at the moment. It can be like improved quite a bit, I think. So we have a very simple project registry, and then it comes from a pretty much like what you have, the civic.json file. So we have a gov0.json file describing pretty much the basic metadata, and the interesting bit would be audience. Because some of the projects are just for developers. This is an API, so it's not for end users to consume. And the product being a data or a demo site or things like that. And well, just normal things like that. So I was talking to Noah actually earlier about maybe we can collaborate to try to find a common spec to do this kind of project registration. And so, like for example, for ideas that I think it's more complicated. We do have a template for people who are like mostly non-technical to fill in what they imagine they should have, and so basically that happens mostly on Hackpad. So we have a collection of Hackpad called Idea Pool, and then we have a template, and then forcing people to choose a license and things like that. And then the preliminary discussion about projects will happen on that idea pad, and then maybe someone picks it up, turn it into a project in GitHub, or yeah.
And then that gets approved to go on the project list?
No one's actually, so does that get approved to go into project page? No one actually approve things. I mean, it gets like, it's a self-service thing. You put it into somewhere, it parses the JSON file, and then see, yeah.
How do you teach governance within the community for someone who is coming in to learn these different steps around Hackpad and et cetera?
How do we teach governance for newcomers and the thing? I don't think it's really like governance yet, but just the tools that we use. So once you're used to this collaboration way, you're kind of into like being affected by the tools to say, oh, we are collaborating with people. So you kind of turn your mindset a bit if you're not already in this community. So and you see how the other people how the other people work together, and.
Okay, then how do you go about teaching the tools?
Yes, so how do we go about teaching the tools? Funnily, there's a... so we have a join page on the website, and I think there's now an English version. Oh, that's not here. Anyway. So the join page on Gov0 actually has the level up program, which is an external project being embedded. And it tells you, okay, if you want to do something, you should first read the manifesto, the introduction, and you can click, okay, you've been through that. And then the tools, the IRC and things like that. So there's a, like, on the top left-hand side, you see a little progress bar, right? Very tiny progress bar. So yeah, and I think there's a bingo version of that where they shuffles the tick boxes, right? And then you can connect the line or something. So yeah, it's just like for newcomers, we throw them some basic tutorials about the tools. But I think most effectively is during the hackathons. If you like, they are not like they're the newcomers. When they work with other people together, they get all this thing in a really compact way of like, okay, people collaborate this way, and this is really useful.
So just one last follow-up question is, if you have tools as process, right, and then events as culture, how frequently are you running your, can you just talk about the types of events that you have? Because you had quite a few hackathons, and in New York City to host a hackathon is, it's an expensive process, right? But we host a hack night every Wednesday. So talk about the events/culture that you bring people through.
Oh, I like the quote. Well, we have the tools as process and events as culture. Yeah. So how is the events being organized and frequency and stuff like that, right? So the major hackathons happens like every 2 months. And the venue is sponsored by a research institute. so we pay only for the food. So it's kind of not very expensive for us, and so we just collect random donations. And nowadays we have lots of people being invited to be speaking somewhere in the school or in the government, and then most of the time we kind of put the money in this pool for buying food. And but that's the major hackathons that we have. But that's pretty much all we had at the beginning, and there are starting to be like spin-offs for smaller hackathons around the country. And so that just 2 days ago there was another Moedec, the dictionary-based hackathon. So they focus most on the dictionary, but also they welcome other GovZero projects like the political contribution people to come over and then collaborate. So they kind of like it's very unorganized and yeah, kind of like that. Does that answer all the question?
I mean, so it's rhizomatic. It's from the ground up. The different events. How do you teach consistency, or at least, one concern is teaching a quality of events, the quality of events, and in that quality of events is ensuring a quality of process.
Right.
So how do you go about teaching organizers to go out and to teach other people how to organize events?
So how do we teach like other people to organize event in the sense that there's a consistent culture and way? I don't know. I think we have a small guideline for event organizers about the safe space being and safe space and what you like a checklist of things that you should take care of, and we encourage streaming as well. So if something goes wrong, people can say, hey, you shouldn't do this and stuff like that. So. But that wasn't really being designed beforehand. So it kind of there's no strict rules about things, but just like the culture that the people in the community are comfortable with. So they kind of try to not quite enforce it, but kind of encourage having that kind of culture. So not very strict. Yes.
I think this is a really interesting back and forth of questions, and I just wanted to ask a follow-up to that, saying, are you seeing that people attending your events who are maybe offline participants normally, when they have a great time at your event, they're part of the culture, but do you find that they actually become part of the online and ongoing work, or do they only show up for events? Do you have an online-offline split, basically?
Do we have an online-offline split for people coming to certain events or participating mostly online? Yes and no. There are people who just feel like in line with what we are doing, and they kind of come to the event every time, but they don't do anything online. So they kind of like donated their hour every 2 months, right? And there are people who are just fixing simple issues in GitHub. So we do have a tool to aggregate across repositories and encourage people to tag things as bite-sized and for people to like get contributions. And so yeah, I do see some of the splits, and but we do encourage lots like people to get on IRC to like communicate more and yeah, I don't have a very good answer about if we're to improve this or not to, but it's an interesting thing to observe, I think. Yeah. Answer the question?
Yeah, so you mentioned at least one project that kind of predated the GovZero identity, or maybe if I understood that correctly.
Sorry, which project do you mean?
The one where you could look up a company to see if it was impacted by the trade deal.
Oh, the question is the company, the lookup project that sees if you're affected by the trade deal is predates GovZero or not. No, it predates the Congress occupation, but it was one of the projects being proposed by some non-technical people to GovZero, and then I think that project must have like more than 15 people working on that.
But so I'm trying to understand how the GovZero framework kind of what the timeline is like for these ideas, because it seems like a lot of things that you just talked about are ideas that have been percolating in a lot of other places, but then you were able to feed people into actually doing them. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
So about timeline, about how like idea turns into projects, and it's really hard to estimate because we don't have like something to enforce but generally, if you look at the past projects, you can see some of the patterns, like how you get programmers interested in some projects, and we do have a small guideline for how non-technical people can propose projects and how they can attract people and things like that. And so it's really, I mean, hard question, I think, to answer. It's like, yeah, because it's very loose community, and then people work on whatever they care about, and then you kind of market your project if you want more people to care about it. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yes. Okay. We can talk later. Yes.
Are you thinking about like being a candidate for the next election in Taiwan?
Me?
Yeah, you.
The question is, am I thinking about being a candidate for the next election in Taiwan?
Being involved in politics.
Okay. So actually, this question came out the first time I gave a talk about Gov0 back in, I think, end of the previous year, and my answer to that is that I think people can have more influence in where they're most capable of. So for myself, if I create like tools for transparency and things, it will be more useful as me being a politician or something like that. And and I was asked by it's a web developer conference at that time. So I was saying that we the developers, we control how the information flows. We form the information. This is much more powerful than politicians, right?
So you're not a candidate. You already are in politics.
I don't know how to answer that. Am I in politics? I care about things, but yeah, in a weird way that we want to use technology to change how people care about things, right?
I, for one, welcome our new Gov0 overload.
Cool. Any other questions? No? Great. We'll conclude the formal portion of the evening. And thank you once again for coming up here and diverting out of the schedule that you had pre-planned. So thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you all.